So far, we have mostly dealt with just drawing in notes and programming them instead of actually recording them. But now we are going to get into actually recording a few notes, and I'm going to do so with my MIDI keyboard, which I have enabled in the MIDI settings. And I've been using it to play a lot of things so far, selecting a channel, and then playing a note on the keyboard here. And that's really most of what's going to happen, except for we're actually going to take that data and record it. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new instrument. Let's do a Fruity Keys this time, which is just a piano plugin. And I'll put it down here, and I'm actually going to go into the channel rack and hold Alt and press up arrow a few times to move that next to the other instruments. And I'm not really worried about a mixer track right now, but as far as recording goes, we're going to give ourselves a new pattern. So I'll click the plus sign, and I'll say piano. And so we have this nice blank pattern. And this is a pretty simple process, really. We can just click this record button up at the top, and then a little dialog box will come up asking you what you want to record, and you can have this not come up in the future. I'll leave it for now. And at the moment, I'm going to record notes and automation, and that will just set up all these things up here. If I right-click on the record button, we have notes and automation, and you can click other things in here. And side note, if you right-click on things with checks like this, you will not exit out of the drop-down, whereas if you left-click, it will exit out after you click. We have notes and automation enabled, and we can actually quantize our input, but we'll come back to do that. And for now, with line as the snap setting, it won't automatically quantize anything. And just to see what we're doing, I'm going to right-click and open the FL keys in the piano roll, and you'll see exactly how these notes are recorded. I'm also going to go up and turn on the metronome here. You can also press Control-M to do that, but that just gives us a metronome on the beat. And I'm going to also give a count off with this button here, and that's just going to give a few clicks before it actually starts recording. So with the channel I want to record selected, I'm going to have 4 beats, and I'm actually going to set this to pattern, even though we can do it in song, and we will in just a minute. And then I will go up and hit play. I'll have 4 beats. And looking at the piano roll, I have all those notes right down as I played them. You'll note that I'm actually off a little bit on that particular rhythm. I could just hit Control Q, and then everything will snap or quantize onto a beat. I'll hit Control Z to undo that. I could also hit Alt Q, and then I could just quantize the start time or end time, and just basically have a few other settings that I can play with for quantization. And that's just a tool. You can quick quantize with Control Q, or quantizing start time Shift Q, or just quantize with all those settings Alt Q. And another thing, I could just undo all of my recording, Control Alt Z to undo a few steps. And if I change my snap to a actual division of time instead of line, and then I do the same thing, I'll record notes and automation, then I'll hit play. And it automatically quantizes my input. Right-clicking on the record button, start and end time are quantized. My personal preference is just to leave it on line so that I record it as I actually play it and then quantize just as I need to, because at that point, even if I'm wrong, or if I record just way off for whatever reason, I can still go in, edit it actually manually, and find the places that I want these notes to be. Hold Alt to bypass the snap, and then I could just quantize like that. Undo Shift Q to just quantize the start time, so I still have some durations of things that are different. But I like that flexibility as opposed to quantizing on input. That may be different for you. But as you see, if you have a velocity-sensitive keyboard, you're recording velocities for each of these notes and all of that sort of stuff, it's very easy to get in place. And all of these sorts of editing options that we had to go through in the piano roll before, we can do the same thing, slicing, editing, in whatever ways we've gotten a feel for so far. I'm going to delete this, Control and drag, delete, and we'll actually go to record a little bit for a drum, and we're going to do this straight into the step sequencer. And you'll notice that obviously we recorded into the piano roll before because we had our settings such that it records durations and everything like that. But if we click in here, for a lot of these notes, we don't really want it to do that. So we can right click on the record button, say record into step sequencer, and do the same thing. And then it reduced it down to just the tick size here. So that is just a shrunk note, basically, as we saw before, it just triggers the sound, and that works for samples especially well, and it just is a tick in the step sequencer. And I'm going to turn off the countdown, hit play. And even if I wasn't exactly on the right beat there, it quantizes exactly where it thinks I want to be in terms of steps. So if I turn off the recording, I've got my little sequence recorded right into the step sequencer. Again, is this sort of thing as easy as just plugging in all of those notes? That's up for you to decide. However you want to do it. Sometimes it feels a little better to actually play some of these things as opposed to just draw them in. But whatever your preference is, you can go about it that way. Or really, I use both of these options a lot of the time because sometimes different things make sense to do. And like I said before, we can also do this in the playlist. So I will remove all of these notes so we have a blank pattern, and also remove that one here. The basic idea here, I will just stretch this pattern out so we have a longer area to work with, and I will hold Control to select our drum pattern, Shift to drag over some copies, and now we have our drums playing over this spot in the playlist. And I'll turn off the metronome since we don't really need it. We can have it on if we wanted, but now we have the drums to keep time. And now let's go ahead, select what we want to record onto for the channel, and we'll go up and hit the record button, Notes and Automation. Or again, if we had that so it didn't come up, we could just select Notes and Automation. And this time we actually don't want to record in the step sequencer, and that's how we set it up last time. I'm going to right click to select those and deselect record in the step sequencer because we won't be doing that. And since we are on the line, we're not actually going to be quantizing anything anyway. But anyway, we could turn on that countdown, but instead we're going to leave it off and just start a little earlier in the playlist so we have our own little countdown. And then I'll hit play. And now we recorded. I'll double click on that pattern to select it and bring up the piano roll for it. And I could quantize. I'll Shift Q to get that on a line, turn off the record, and we have that pattern. It's a little bit shorter than what I drug out for, but we can cut it down to that, double click, and then play with it, edit it, right shift and slice, play with the note parameters, anything like that that you would normally do with notes, we have them recorded. And this is perfectly good. We're working with any sort of instrument here. We can record drums, keys, synths, whatever it happens to be on a channel. But even taking that a step further, we can record the movements of different parameters, whether it's something on here, maybe a parameter to change a tone on a generator, or something deeper in the channel settings. Well, let's go ahead and take this pattern, and I'm going to cut it from here, and I'm going to paste it on the SimSynth. Since we have a few more options synthesizer-wise, we can play with that cutoff, and filters are something that's commonly automated. And since we are recording Notes and Automation, if we click here, we'll be able to actually do just that, record the automation of a parameter. So since we already have notes, I'll bring up the piano roll so we see it. Give myself a count off, and I'll just move this knob as we record. And I'll hit F6 to go into the playlist. You can see that there's now a little bit of a shape behind there, and that's the recorded control of that parameter. If I go over to the bottom here, you can also see that. I'll select that in this bottom area of the piano roll. And just like how we drew that in, we just recorded it with the movement as we did it. It's just recording exactly what you're doing. Same way you would do a note, but instead it is that. And you can edit this same way we did before. Right click and drag to make straight lines or step. Hold Alt to bypass the step. Undoing that. Or if we go ahead and select an area down here, if we want to delete, we press delete, or Control Delete to delete space. But I briefly mentioned before, we could go into the events editor, and that's where we can do a little bit more to work with automation. And so if we go in the SimSynth and find the parameter we know we recorded some automation on, and that is the SFV cut, or filter cutoff right here, we can right click, and there's a check next to edit events. I will click it so it goes away, and then pull up the edit events window here. And this is basically the same thing that we had at the bottom of the piano roll, except for dedicated to just that. You can select certain areas, delete them, and just basically work with it in a little bit more of a bigger window where you're not as crowded. And doing this, you can make patterns devoted only to automation if you want to cut out the actual notes and just loop this automation that you made or recorded, or make yourself an automation pattern and just make it stretch for the entire length of your song and record whatever automations of different knobs onto it. You could have all these different things happen. You'll see each of them listed here in this edit events. And you can pick between those pattern controls in that top toolbar in the same manner we have everywhere else. And then you have your notes or automation recorded. Quick side note, I'm going to F12 to close everything here and just open up one more to work with a little bit of MIDI. If we want to record with our keyboard knobs, we can right click and say link to controller, and then it will automatically learn whatever MIDI CC number our controller might have. I'm going to turn a knob on my keyboard. And now we have ourselves a linked knob, and you can edit that, right-clicking, opening it again. And even with something as simple as linking knobs, there's actually a lot of depth that we can get into, but we'll leave that for another time. But as far as actually using this knob in practice, we could record some automation that way. And if you look into the pattern, you can see the movement that I'm doing on this knob of my keyboard, recording into that automation pattern. And you can certainly record over things that you've done, and it just kind of replaces it in the pattern, and that's the same thing that goes for notes if I wanted to record over those. But this is a great way to get your ideas down and actually physically do them yourself before you might edit them or draw in different things later. So this has all just been note information, but we're going to come back in the next video to work with audio and actually recording that. So I will see you then.